Welcome to Hashknife Hangouts. I'm Calen. The other guy on the left is my father, Brandon. If this is your first time joining us, again, like, comment, and subscribe. Find us at the links below. In today's topic, we're going to go over agricultural education. So I know it's getting to be that time of year again when kids are getting back to school, or they have already begun, I think, in some places. And seniors, high school seniors, are looking for colleges, universities, any place they're going to go. So I thought this would probably be a good opportunity to discuss agriculture programs in the United States. One did populate from Canada, but we'll stick to the United States. I did look through about a half dozen separate sources, got a rough idea of which schools are the best to go to in terms of quality. And then I also took a gander and a shot at affordability too, because that's another big one as schools get more and more costly. So I'll list the first top 25 for the 2022 year, and then provide some of the top 10 that I kind of extrapolated from that based off of their most common reoccurring themes and stuff like that. And I've got an Excel sheet that I'll pull it up. And then I also, like I said, I looked at some affordability. So I'll pull that up real quick. So the best ones for 2022 were, and this was actually very unexpected for me, Cornell University was supposed to be number one. Texas A&M, not a surprise, number two. Number three, University of Georgia, University of Florida, UC Davis in California was number five, with North Carolina State and Kansas State at number seven. OSU, or Oklahoma State, was number eight, with Clemson coming in at nine. The University of Wisconsin, that's not a surprising one for me either, was number 10, with the Ohio State University coming in at 11, Minnesota Twin Cities 12, Va Tech, or Virginia Tech to some of those out there, 13, Purdue at 14. That was not surprising, being in northern Indiana. Cal Poly, or California Polytechnic State University in San Luis Obispo, number 15. That's a big rival for Montana State. The Mississippi State University, number 16, with number 17 coming in at Iowa State. Colorado State University, whoop, whoop, that's my other one. That was number 18, with Michigan State coming in at 19. University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, that was 20. Washington State, 21. University of Idaho, I think that's the Vandals, if I remember right, 22. Auburn University, 23. Penn State, 24. And Texas Tech coming in at 25. So that was 2022. A lot of the top 10s that I found that were reoccurring, going from 1 to 10, Cornell, Texas A&M, University of Florida, University of Illinois, Purdue, Ohio State, UC Davis, North Carolina State, Kansas State, and then rounding it out at University of Georgia for number 10. I'll throw in the affordable ones. Again, I got some top 10s and stuff. Most of them were actually very similar to what we had before with the top 25, but I'll list a couple top 10s real quick. McGill University, that was supposed to be in Montreal. NDSU, or North Dakota State, Oklahoma State, Utah State, Iowa State, Arizona State, UC Davis again, Penn State, Andrews University in Michigan, and top 10 finishing out with Cornell University. So that was supposed to be the most affordable. The big top 5 that were the most affordable over a couple of various sources were number 1, Purdue, number 2, NDSU, the Bison, the Oklahoma State Cowboys, Ohio State, and finally, again, UC Davis, which is surprising me. So we'll kind of start there. I think, what was my note here? Yeah, I said disappointed not to see Montana and Wyoming, but I did see throughout all of the stuff, North Dakota State University, South Dakota State University, and Colorado State. And that might be an interesting place to start, is we've got some of those more rural states involved, but they're not really considered either the best quality or necessarily the most affordable. So with that, I'll throw it over to Dad.
Well, you don't think of California as being really agricultural based, but they are. I mean, they're a breadbasket really for state or our entire country, because a lot of fruits and vegetables
Right.
grown there. I mean, they have siphoned water from everywhere to fill up some of those valleys and irrigate, and high production. The weather's right. It's not surprising that they would have some ag schools there. Now, the only question is what are they teaching in these schools,
Right.
especially UC Davis and Cornell. I don't expect them, or I would have never chosen them to be affordable. That just is not, I think California, and I don't think anything being affordable.
Well, and
So,
especially Cornell too,
what's
because
going on
Cornell's
there?
technically an Ivy League. It's a private school. It's
Right.
in New York. I've been in New York. I know where it's at. It's at Ithaca, which that makes sense for being an agricultural school. But yeah, going back to affordability, I question that.
Yeah, and some of the other states like Iowa, uh,
Right.
those are those are. I mean, I think of that, and I think of stalks of corn and cattle
Hmm.
and feedlots. So uh, probably a lot of these schools have niches that I think of California, and I'm thinking, you know, green vegetables, that kind of stuff. Not so
Right.
much wheat, and there is a good share there, I'm sure, but irrigated crops that you see in your grocery stores. Your peppers, onions, broccoli, all of that kind of stuff, and then uh, so having a curriculum based on kind of that sort of stuff would make sense. I don't know what the curriculum is. That's what I say. I have no idea,
Right.
and I don't know. Are they more apt to in their curriculum say, oh, this is bad. We got to stop this. I mean, that's possible. I don't know. In today's climate, uh, no pun intended, actually. Uh, where they stand on um, crop growth, irrigation. I mean, the whole works that go all the way around everything we do, shipping, marketing. I would hope that they're really doing something that is, you know, agricultural based for the benefit of agriculture and the consumer. But, one never knows. You just don't know. I kind of tend to trust some of the schools that are, Georgia, Texas,
Hmm.
Idaho, uh, and I don't know what they teach. I would assume some of the Texas stuff is probably a lot of grains, cattle, not too different from what we're doing, just a different um, way to do it, seasonal changes, that kind of stuff. So I'm sure that there's a lot on all of these. There's been such a push on pesticide use, herbicide use,
Right.
that kind of stuff, which is good because uh, you know that the- and maybe just segues right into a generational or age type learning. These are all colleges, and typically uh, young people just out of high school, been through starting out in like a 4-H club at a local club,
Or
uh,
FFA.
that and then on to FFA when they're in high school, and then they get into a college course or coursework and degrees in ag management, something like that, or like your brother, the uh, uh, should we just butcher what his degree is in, like grasses and
Yeah, that's
weeds,
pretty much what it is.
but he's all right in there along the side of that. So um it's not surprising that you have all these based for young students. But actually yesterday I registered for a and it's a single day course. It's very specific on grasslands and weed management. Why wouldn't I? And that's put on by the local extension agents and offices here on our local conservation district. So that education doesn't stop when you are out of college or out of a high school program. I mean, you
Right.
you really need to stay on top of these things if you're going to try to do better or try
Well,
to do things more efficiently.
I think that goes with anything, but
Yeah.
I think it just shows that agriculture is not just a bunch of hillbillies with straw hanging out of their mouth and stuff like that. They're the fact that if you want to be a good, I don't know, provider in the sense that a doctor or a paramedic or something like that, you have to hone your skills and get recertified every once in a while. If you want to be teacher and be a good one, you have to continue to go get more education, go get recertifications in certain things. Same thing. I mean, really anything. Same with lawyers. I think lawyers are supposed to have a certain amount of continuing education credits every year, and they're audited like every 2 years or something like that. But that's the process, and I think that the fact that it applies to agriculture as well should help show and illustrate that it's not just a bunch of, you know, guys that don't know anything. They're learning constantly. They're also trying to take care of the land. So when new information is provided, like, oh, we've been doing this wrong the whole time. Now we got to try and change it and fix it, or, and stuff like that.
Well, yeah, and I think the difference in that is the professions that you mentioned, doctor, lawyer, teacher, et cetera, those are mandated for them to maintain a license,
Yeah, that's true.
right? And in agriculture, unless you have some kind of a permit or licensure in which to handle, say, like in our case or my case, um, pesticides or something that is a controlled type uh, license or controlled use, then you don't have anything that is requiring you to continue education.
Right.
But the downside to that is you may or may not be as efficient in what you're doing. And some people are content to do, or you know what, they have on their place for what they have as an asset. And I keep talking about assets as basically your ground, whether you've got good grasslands, timber, whatever you have on it, and the water that flows through it or under it. You may be already at the peak of your efficiency. And if you are,
Hmm.
hey, that's great. That didn't happen by itself. Your ancestors or yourself continued to learn, whether it was by learning, doing, failing, or learning, doing, success. You're still learning, and you're still applying those learnings to what you're doing. So yeah, it's not surprising, and it's a good thing that those opportunities are still there. Otherwise, you rely now on sources such as an internet,
Right.
getting on and getting to a search engine to try to find something. And anything that's on there, I take with skepticism, because who put it on, why'd they put it there, why are they saying what they're saying, how does this apply? I mean, there's a
Well,
lot
that's also
of
why you got to
pitfalls.
use multiple sources too. You got to double
Absolutely.
check and triple check and stuff like that.
Yes, correct. Yeah, absolutely right. And it used to be when I was basically your age and there was no such thing as an internet, then Al Gore hadn't invented it yet. We, we you learned by this method. It was either schools or you're right back to some of your local conservation districts teaching you, or you learn from people at a coffee shop. Guys
Mm.
will sit around, and they'll drag a plow or a harrow or a seeder behind a tractor for 16 hours a day until that's done. And then when they're finished up, they pray for rain and they go to town and have some coffee with somebody of a morning, and they're comparing. Hey, what do you think? What are you doing? I mean, I've heard these conversations between farmers, cattlemen. I mean,
Yeah. I mean, I've
you
had a couple of
name
those
it.
conversations with people too, especially
Yeah,
the fact that I, to an extent, a lot of my peers in my age have not seen as much of the United States as I have. I'm always questioning, especially when I go back home. Hey, what do you guys do? Like one of I consider one of my little brothers, one of Braden's friends that he grew up with. I was talking to him one night over a couple of beers when I was home over leave on like Christmas time. I was like, hey, what do you guys do? Because I know what other people do elsewhere. I know what we do for our cows, like bull cow ratio,
right.
and we're just comparing, curious. I wanted to see kind of what they do, and he was also curious of what we did and the justification behind it. But
Yeah, the why is the most important part, because you can
yeah.
you can, and that's where the efficiency comes in. Is say that they've got let's say the Yellowstone River, for instance, goes through their place, and it doesn't necessarily do this, but just as an example, and they've got a 4-section of pasture that runs along the Yellowstone, or the Yellowstone cuts through it. Let's say that, or right at the
Right.
edge of it perfectly, and they can access it. Would they run less or more bulls than we would, where we have a spring or manageable springs and wells? And the answer is they have the ability for a bull to never meet a cow in 4 sections, and not be able to pair up, where when we have smaller areas to go to, water holes, they all will congregate at those places and you can funnel them in there. Their chance meeting at the mingle bar is a lot better. So, their bull to cow ratio may need to be higher. And of course, everybody, well, not everybody, because there are plenty of people that do it, is let's say they got 30 head of cows and they'll put one bull with them. And like, ooh, that's risky. What if that bull is no longer viable?
Oh, yeah.
What if he's shy? And there are shy bulls that just don't breed. Uh, you need to have multiple, at least two bulls to that, which would put you down to a 15-to-1 ratio. But
Right.
still, you know what? You want those cows to be bred, or you want to take a chance on them not being bred.
Right.
So there is that too. And I think that higher saturation takes care of that, but it doesn't necessarily apply to the people like what you're talking about, as a friend of yours and ours, that's how they do it. It's what they can do with what they have and what works best for them.
Right.
So yeah, and talking about that, everybody does it. It's the why that's the important part. It's
Oh,
not
yeah.
just this is what we do. It's why do you do it? That's
Well,
where you learn.
Well, and I think that's important with anything, but especially agriculture, because
Yep.
especially as years have gone on, we found pesticides and herbicides and stuff like that. Or, oh, that wasn't good, not only for us, but also the environment. And so you change that. And that's where Braden comes in. He's like, yeah, we've learned over the last 15, 20 years, you don't want to do this, but you can use this, where we thought there was the complete opposite.
Yep.
Or, hey, you can use this, but it needs to be used in a very manageable way. You can't just go spraying and praying, so to speak.
No, that's right. And some of the issues with residuals in pesticides or herbicides are long term. Yeah, they might make it look good this year for the next 3, but after that, pretty soon,
Right.
start to affect what's going on everything. So I was about 11, I think, years old, 10 or 11 years old before I ever saw a bald eagle because of the use of DDT.
Yeah.
And so I was like, wow, I can remember that vividly. We were feeding cattle one morning. It was like a January morning. It was way cold, snow on the ground, and my grandpa, I think, was driving. Dad was in the back, and I was just along for the ride. I was sitting in a warm pickup, and Dad got in, and the grandpa said, he's just stopped. He goes, look it over there. And on top of a tree was a bald eagle sitting there, an adult, and I'm like, wow. We sat there and watched that thing with field glasses for probably, in today's terms, binoculars, but field glasses for, I'll bet you we sat and watched that thing for 15, 20 minutes, and it never moved except for just moving its head.
Yeah.
But it was such a novelty. They're like, and they were even surprised by it. Man, we haven't seen eagles in 15, 20 years, not like that. So it was cool. And now they're all over the place. They're common up that because of the decline of them, and what it did to their eggs. And then now it's not a reintroduction, but the rebuilding of those numbers, because we stopped using something that we didn't think was bad at the time.
Right. So kind of going forward too, we I listed off Idaho, Colorado, the Dakotas, Iowa, like Nebraska. Surprisingly, now that I think about it, Nebraska was not on that list.
Yeah.
But I guess maybe I should add Nebraska too. But do you find it surprising that Montana, Wyoming, and Nebraska were not listed on any of those lists, both for affordability or for quality?
Yeah. I don't know what they're using for their criteria.
Yeah, same.
Montana and Wyoming are both smaller schools, really, in comparison to, Texas, A&M or Texas Tech. Those are, Cornell, those are UC Davis. Those are huge schools. A lot of these are really
for
big.
example, I think I should say, I'm not going to count University of Montana. That's not an ag school. Montana State was traditionally, it was set up as a college Montana State College is what it was. And that was based off of a land grant. That's kind of the history of it. And that land grant required you to do agricultural based stuff. So Montana State was already set up for that success. When I left in 2016, I want to say the entire student population hovered around 35,000. It might be a little more now. But then Wyoming Now, keep in mind, Wyoming has a different school system. Wyoming has it set up so that you can go to a local community college, and then those community colleges then feed into the university system in Laramie. If I remember correctly, when I was looking at University of Wyoming as a senior, I think the student population was hovering around 50,000 or so, and I can Google that while we're talking. But it is also an agricultural college, and it's a very good one. But again, I was surprised because Montana State is very affordable, and I'll tell like my finances. I had to spend quite a bit the first year. I think it was about 20,000 because I had to live in the dorms that per the policy there. After that, I moved out. We were able to also save Braden some money because he could live with me when he came as a freshman. But then after that, my tuition total for each year was under 10,000. I think it was closer to 9. And the Army was able to help me pay for that because I was using um my ROTC scholarship to pay for it. The student loan that I had came straight from freshman year, and I had to pay that off. But it was very, very, very affordable, especially comparing it to other people that I know that walked away with, close to 100 grand worth of student loans and stuff like that. I only had, 15 at most, and I was able to get that done within 4 years. But again, affordability in Montana State, knowing that I don't know, I don't know if it's the best school, but it's a good school. And I don't understand why Wyoming, and then Nebraska is known for being a good ag school too. Why none of those were added to that list? But I'm going to look up
Yeah,
Wyoming while
that's a
you
very
talk.
that's a good question. I was kind of surprised to see that as well because there may be somewhat of a shift that's taking place there, and I think it's very purposeful. Uh, MSU is also known as a very good engineering school now, has been for a while. Very
Right.
strong engineering school, which is not necessarily directly ag related. It is, but not in the nuts and bolts of, okay, here's your grasses, here's your land, that kind of stuff. So there's a shift there, and I think what they're doing is they're chasing as a school, they're chasing the different types of industry that's out there and trying to make their mark on it. They've done some really good things with their engineering. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not putting that down at all. They've done very, very well that way. But the affordability that you speak of compared to when your mom and I went to school,
Yeah.
it's all in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah.
You think that's not very high, and we're like, oh my God. Of course, I mean, different times it's still a struggle. I think we were comparing, and of course we were on the quarter system at that time, not semesters, and it was like $348 or something for a quarter for tuition, and then your books you would be 100 and a half per quarter. So if you take call it $700 for 3 quarters, you're looking at 2,500 bucks max, more 21 to 2,500, and that was a struggle. It was a
Right.
huge struggle, because it's just where we were on that. But yeah, comparing school to school, that's really where the meat and potatoes is where can I go to school and still get the same education or reasonably good education, and then fill in some of those blanks later on, because I don't think there's probably any school that is in its totality going to have all the answers for everything. It just isn't possible.
Right.
And how
Well,
much do you retain?
yeah. One, looking at the population real quick, I think based off of the college community thing, Wyoming's actually less. It's got about 12,000 students, and then Montana State, based off of the 2017. I don't know why they're doing that. It was 16,000, but I know
There's more than that now. Yeah.
there is a lot more than that. I don't know why that's so much lower than I remember, because I know it's significantly higher, but it is what it is. But no, I agree with that's the part where when kids are looking for schools, they have to determine quality versus affordability. And I think, especially as you said with Montana State, it was originally a land grant school and it was supposed to be focused on agriculture, but it's since switched to engineering, and it is a good engineering school. But I wish it would provide more agricultural opportunities and more agriculturally based stuff. because it is a land grant school. Because I was hoping to get a master's in agribusiness through Montana State, and they don't have a master's program,
Right.
unfortunately. And so I was looking elsewhere, and that's what I settled on, Colorado State with them. But there's it just surprises me because Montana is so agriculturally centric, um, and so is Wyoming, very much so, that I was just surprised that South Dakota and North Dakota made it, but
Right.
neither of those states did. And again, going back to Nebraska, Nebraska is huge on grains and cattle feeding,
Right.
and they were not on that list whatsoever. I never saw them populate, which
Yeah.
really
There's
surprised me.
some really big ranches, those Nebraska grasslands, sand hills in Nebraska. There's some really good grazing opportunity, and then they raise a lot of hay, you know. So that does surprise me as well. They're very diverse, I guess, is where I'm kind of going with that, with their agricultural opportunities there. So having a school that covers a lot of that stuff would be good, and they're very good at it. I mean, Nebraska is known as a real quality state
Hmm.
for what they do as well. And I think, I shouldn't put one above the other. Again, it's what you can do with what you have for your assets, and I think every state has a lot of really good success stories. Otherwise, you still wouldn't be in business with as
Right.
narrow margins as you got. With regard to the changes in your ag schools or how those morph, that really is largely dependent on your leadership in those schools.
Hmm.
What do they want to do? And there's a lot of these schools that, they're hiring gladiators for uh their presidents, chancellors, whatever, and the board of regents kind of just go along with whatever they want. And in this state, it's a board of regents, or a board that oversees all of the universities, but they kind of let them do what they want. And there's kind of been a slow morph to minimize the agricultural stuff at Montana
There
State.
has.
I mean, it's obvious. They used to be a strong in their military training as
Hmm.
well, if I recall, and that's gone by the wayside,
Yep.
and largely because you got someone in there as a uh, leader of the school who isn't necessarily favorable to those programs. So they, over time, and some of these people, if they're popular, they stay and
Right.
they keep getting rehired, and they're able to change the face of what really goes on in a school. And I don't disagree with the engineering portion of that, not at all. That there's some value to that, absolutely, and some very sharp people come out of there and into industry that is very well needed in the state as well. But um, I don't think that you sacrifice one for the other. I think you try to make them all strong.
Yeah.
That's what really makes that a viable school, and that's what brings people in. That's what increases those numbers. So
Yeah, I agree. Well, and what you're talking about at Montana State, I know for a fact because we I experienced it. Being
yeah,
ROTC, I saw things, the support system quickly dwindle when that individual took over, and I don't think it's ever come back very much. The Unfortunately, the relationship between the school and the ROTC programs, because there's Air Force and Army there, have the ROTC programs now have to rely a lot, at least when I left, they had to rely very much on each other and assist each other and try and just kind of make things happen on their own, um, without the use of school assistance to an extent. Then the other thing too is you're talking about how agricultural is not, it's not really a big focus anymore. It's more towards engineering. It's also, I noticed when I was there, the focus also went towards things like the finer arts, such as uh like architecture. Architecture, it used to be a really good program at Montana State. I heard that it kind of dwindled a little bit, but I saw that there was a lot of focus going back towards it. But then the other thing is when it comes to the agricultural part, uh, they're kind of they're kind of by themselves in a whole nother spot on campus now. They're kind of like the nerds that are in a corner. And then the
yeah,
other thing is they have the older buildings. So it's like, hey, you started this place, you can stay there. And then unfortunately, this is what kind of really upset me when I was on my way out from Montana State was some of the land that was originally appropriated for agricultural use because it's a land grant university. It was set up so that here's your land, this is how you will utilize it. It was starting to slowly get chipped away. And I don't know how they were able to do that legally. because you're setting up some real bad things for that in terms of uh, what is it, precedents.
Yep.
But they were taking away things like the different wheats and barleys that they grow and they test and stuff like that. Um, and they were replacing it with, I want to say, things like apartments and
Yeah.
housing for students, and that was their justification, was housing for students. I'm like, oh, that's a slippery slope. Don't do that. But they did it anyway. But on the other hand, the nice part about the agricultural part about the university, um, philosophically philosophically, I disagree with how they go about it, but they also incorporated horse training into it, which does help. They've bolstered their equine part of the university. They do have some people there that they brought from some well-known trainers throughout the United States, and they've been incorporated into that program. Again, I don't necessarily agree with how they go about horse training, but the fact that they're involving horse training into the program, I think was cool, and it kind of did, that was the part of diversity in the university system for agriculture that I thought was good, because they're starting to incorporate more livestock into it rather than just grain growing.
Yeah, and you're right. The a lot of the their experimental stations, like Fort Keogh, for instance, in Miles City, they're all part of the MSU system, and these are places that actually have the property, the ground, and right there at the campus as well, to either grow crops, try something with cattle. You're looking at genetics. You're looking at weight and gain on your grains or different feeds. These are all places that it's a learning for the students, but at the same time, they're doing real time uh, agricultural work to bolster and help industry, the agricultural industry. So when you start leaving some of that and go to the wayside, where are you going to do that at? Where are you going to get that? Then it's all theory, and you can't prove that. And I think sometimes they uh, I think kind of backdoor that, and they say, we don't need this ground anymore. We have we'll go into a partnership with a benefactor who is a large ranch who will allow us to do this. Well, that's not permanent. That
Right.
can change at any time, and that's
It's
a
a
dangerous
sale.
thing to do
As soon
too.
as a sale happens, that completely
Yeah,
changes. Yeah.
that's right. So that's kind of that's an issue that I don't know that they think through, and maybe they do, and maybe it's purposeful. I don't know, but um, the long and short of it is, you've got to maintain and continue your educational opportunities for everybody. And if you eliminate that entirely, where are you going to go? Back
Right.
to the internet?
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily that doesn't necessarily transfer for what they're doing in Mississippi to what we're doing in Montana.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing too that I was thinking, if you're talking about the experimental stations and stuff like that, is uh the one cool thing about Montana is it's so diverse in its land from east to west and north to south, that having those satellite universities as well helps to provide a whole lot more data, because okay, you've got a really fertile uh valley in Gallatin Valley, but then if you go a whole 100 miles to the east and you start hitting the Yellowstone Valley itself is fertile, but then you go outside that by about 5 miles and suddenly you're in a desolate part of the world, and it's trying to create those crops and grow those crops and sustain everything. It's a whole nother world. And so using places like Miles City to get some of those far outer reaches of Montana and incorporate that with what you normally get with what we know of as a fertile land growth and everything, it's very beneficial to understanding how not only weather but region and different dirt types and stuff help too.
Well, you look at some of the diversity going from following the Yellowstone up, and where it turns, go east of Miles City even, and along the whole valley of the Yellowstone, and then it turns north and goes from Glendive north to Sydney, it heads north and dumps into the Missouri. It's amazing the croplands and what's been done there, and that's all been through largely irrigation. But that wasn't just, yeah, we'll try this. I mean, there's a plan put in place with that, and a lot of that was agriculturally educationally based. So it's made a tremendous difference in the productivity of what Montana produces as a state. And we have some of the, as far as grains, we have some of the highest and most sought after proteins in our winter and spring wheats all across the nation. It's always been high in its quality.
Why is that? Do you know?
I think part of it is our growing season. I think part of it is how they adjust what we have for water, the planting season. It's basically seasonally done with the types of ground we have, and
Hmm.
then managed. It's just kind of a perfect way to do that. And I think a lot of that has been because they've tried different things. And again, the agricultural aspect of it with the education behind it. And that's where, you try things, you work things, you look at things. And we've always been there. And I think largely it's our growing season, the ground that crops are grown on, and you can buy seeds anywhere. You can do that, but we just happen to have some areas when you're up there north of Great Falls called the Golden Triangle area. You get high yields, super. I mean, that's kind of the baseline, I think, for Montana
Hmm.
is that north of Great Falls up there around Conrad, Chester, that area. It's just phenomenal wheat country. It's fairly flat. It's a little further north than here, and I mean in the wintertime they have similar weather to us, but cold, wind. I mean that they get a plant on the winter wheat. It grows and it has to freeze, uh, in order for it to be able to knock itself back and then germinate in the spring, and or not germinate, but then continue the growth. That's just the nature of winter wheat, and they just they kill it up there. I mean, that's just really good soils, uh, time a year for our seasonal growth, and they got some water that comes off of the Rocky Mountains that is not in a rain shadow. I mean, it just is just a good spot. So that's just part of it, and that's some rough country up in there too. You
Hmm.
come off of the Rocky Mountains just south of Glacier Park. Those are not small mountains. I mean, we don't have
No.
small mountains here. There's a few. We don't even really call them mountains. I mean, you're 8,000 to 9,000 feet, but that on the peaks, those are our smaller ones. If you want to call them mountains, otherwise they're just kind of hills.
So the other thing too is, and this is gonna be a little bit of a long way getting around the mountain, but I was talking to somebody yesterday about how the rodeo circuit kind of has figured it out over the last probably 20 to 30 years. They work to get a foundation, and it works for them. And that is, you've got kind of your junior rodeo circuit, kids in junior high and stuff, and they're kind of finally getting into it like 13, 14, start getting competitive, enjoying it. And then you go into the high school circuit, and kids start to get good. They might get a scholarship or two to some different schools, and then they can go further into the college circuit, Montana State, Powell down in Wyoming. And there's other places too. I think Miles City's got a rodeo team. But then there's other universities throughout the United States that do the same thing. And then further, if they're good enough and they show worth, they can either go pro towards the end of their college days, or they can finish out college, get their degree, and then go right into pro rodeo. And it kind of works for them, right? Like the rodeo circuit itself has kind of set up its own foundation in almost like baseball, double triple A leagues,
Right.
to get themselves set up so that then they can feed their system for their players, so to speak. um do you see a better way other than 4-H or FFA for the agriculture community to kind of do that for colleges and universities, or do you think that's going to ever be possible?
Oh, that's a really good question. Um, there are there are individual scholarships I know that are done by some corporations, in which I'm kind of like, yeah, God, you might have something like, for instance, I don't know that they do it, but like Monsanto, for some of the ag on farming.
Hmm.
Um, you may have some like Pfizer vaccines for the Calen. They may have some scholarships, but those are not programs. Those are just scholarships. So
Right.
those are kind of hit and miss. And I don't know. I mean, it takes a real grassroots effort, like the rodeo has done. But let's face it, our country and our culture loves sports.
Right.
They love it. I mean, it's our way to play. And when you're too old to play, you
You
can
watch.
watch others play.
Yeah.
And most of the time they're people I mean, we don't people you don't know them maybe personally, but you follow them because they're local kids. We got a number of people have been to like the national finals and won world titles from this state. And they're part of your state, so they're part of your people that you root for. And so that grassroots of that and that homegrown type of support is what it takes. But sometimes, that thing to do is kind of wearisome. You can't always just keep putting that out there. You need to see a return.
Right.
So the educational part of that is too, is you don't always see that return right away, and
Mm-hmm.
people have short attention spans. So I don't know the answer to that. I think that's what makes it viable. What makes it so that it's in your control as a group who are interested too. You just don't want to depend on, and I don't know how baseball really is done. It's all based on ticket sales and all that stuff. I'm sure
Right.
where rodeo doesn't have near that amount of following, but I don't think we have near the games that are played. Baseball season, good God, I think those guys play 100 and some games a year, 100 and a
Right.
half, something like that, and their season is like 18 months long. It seems to go forever. So rodeo is, they go year round too, different things, but there are different aspects of it. There's the RC or the PRCA, what's the other one?
I mean, there's PBR, but that's just bull
PBR
riding.
is bull riding. Thanks.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's different fractions that you can't agree, so they start their own, and that doesn't help. The PBR that's corporate owned. That's a
Right.
brand in itself. So that's very self-sustaining because face it, bull riding is kind of a sexy thing to
Mm-hmm.
to watch. I mean, you got these little fellas they're tough little monkeys. Don't ever think that they aren't tough and athletic, because they are. And it's fun to watch somebody climb on something that could kill them, especially when you're sitting in the stands with a beer in your hand. That's a whole lot less risky. So having that support is the difficult thing, to get it and then to maintain it. And
Right.
I don't care what it is, whether it's an ag school, whether it is a engineering school, whether it's a liberal arts school, it doesn't matter. You still have to have those people who appreciate what you do and what you want, and see that they get something out of it. And some people, they just like to have their name on a plaque on a wall on a building,
Right.
because they've donated $100,000. Well, good for them. I mean, that's great. I don't care what your likes and dislikes are. If you like that and you want to support that, hey, that is your money. You worked on it. If you're happy with that, fantastic. That's a good thing. That's always a good thing. And that's what it takes. Some people have some pockets to do that. Others don't. But if you can really get a broad supply of those that are supported, you're always better off, instead of depending on, like I say, the Pfizer's, the Monsanto's, or whatever the world, to give into the individual scholarships. That can change, and they can dry those up.
Yeah. And the other thing too is, we're trying to talk about like a feeding system. I guess the other thing too is like how do we as a community, because we've had this conversation before, but how do we as a community continue to support it when we're always trying to send our next generation away? Like there has to be a buy-in at some point of us to say, no, we're going to buckle down and support and encourage the continuation of this lifestyle, rather than saying, no, go somewhere else and be more successful and have a better, an easier life. We have like, to an extent,
Well,
like you have
yeah.
to say, no, you want to be miserable a little bit and be a little upset about how things happen, and try to like continue it, because it is worth it. It's just, there's times where I think we shoot ourselves in the foot, and it's very frustrating.
Well, and that's the paradox to it, really, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I remember vividly the conversation I had with my dad when I was about 18 years old, and I could see, and he knew, I couldn't stay.
Mm-hmm.
So I couldn't be there, and even as working what you can work, that you could support a place. You just can't do that. And so, in the conversation we had, I told him, I said, I need to go look for a job. I need to go do something, find something. And college wasn't on my radar at the moment. And he said, yeah, I know, but I don't want you to go. You know, he didn't want me to go. I didn't want to go, but you both know you have to go.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you do that? The only hope is that it's someday, and someday is, what is that, 5 years from now, or is it 50 years from now?
Right.
You know, someday, uh, maybe you can come back when I'm too old to do this. You know, and these are some of the same conversations we've had with you guys.
Mm-hmm.
And you hope that you can hold it together and you can continue to do something in order to make the place viable, that you don't have to sell, you're not forced out, so that somebody else in another generation has the ability to come in and at least maintain what you've done or do better. And that, again, things change. The educational part of that is so important. And the small school where I went to school, we didn't have FFA.
Right.
Wasn't big enough school to have it. So I think there's some real value there. And you get out of it what you want. It isn't just going on field trips and getting out of classroom
Yeah.
time on other subjects. I mean, there's plenty of kids that do that, you know, and they never use it, never do anything. But I can remember my dad had a lot of information that he had picked up. Guess where? FFA, in that larger school, and they had it there where he went. And so, um, very valuable information that's lifelong, still learned. I mean, they're the basics. Those are the foundational things. And I don't think they're trying to teach some of the latest. They may touch on some things, which is a good thing to do to keep people interested. But um, it's a for me, sometimes it's a struggle. It's like, God, I wish I'd have had this, or a little bit more on the nutrition side of things. And that's where you start, you start digging in yourself and you educate yourself and you talk to. The worst thing you can do and the best thing you can do is talk to feed salesmen. They're gonna
Yeah.
steer you towards their product, right? And why it's so much better. But there's still value in what does a cow do? How do they process? What are the best things at what time of the year? I mean, there's a lot of issues there. What's your water coverage? What's your grasses? I mean, and those are things that you learn, and you don't have to go to school for that. But man, it sure helps if you're paying attention and using that, thinking, 20 years into the future when I might be taking this thing over, or 30 years even into the future.
Um, Another thing too is, we're coming up on the end of the conversation, but uh as a way, if you were to have a couple of kids come up to you and say, hey, I, maybe they are they understand a little bit of agriculture, maybe not. um what would you suggest to them as, hey, they're dead set on some sort of ag degree? What would you recommend to them to study or to understand or to learn as kind of their go-to subject in terms of agriculture in general, so that they could apply it and be the most successful either rancher or farmer that they could potentially be, or a trade?
Well,
Because I know a lot of other
yeah.
people, like grandpa, he was so valuable with his ability to do mechanic work that he saved so much money in the ability to do things. And the fact that he was able to teach you things, who you were then able to teach me things. And I'm not a mechanic, but I can learn when to replace things and fix that, like, oh, okay, take it apart, put it back together, kind of stuff like that. But
Right. Yeah, and I think part of that is what is your need? I mean, what is your? I don't think that somebody should do something they're not interested in. That's a
yeah,
waste of your life.
yeah, I agree.
I think that is so important. That don't if just because I like to do something doesn't mean that you should like to do something. You may have
Mhm.
completely different interests, or you don't have the right aptitude for it. Even if you have the right aptitude, if you don't have an interest or passion for it, do what is passionate. And if it is not agriculture, that's okay. Follow what you want to do. It's very difficult. I think most people, when they leave agriculture as a kid, it's either they've had a belly full of it growing up and like, no, I do not want to struggle like this.
Yeah.
Others like, I love this lifestyle and I don't want it to go away. I'm willing to sacrifice a little bit to maintain that. I mean, it's just all in how you're wired. And so the first thing to do is do what is passionate to you. Uh, the other part of that is, whatever you do it as well as you possibly can. I mean, and this doesn't apply just to agriculture. This is everything. This is life in general. Don't waste your time on things you hate. I mean, we've all had to do some of that. You know,
Yeah.
you sacrifice a little bit or compromise what you really like to do for maybe $1. Or and sometimes it's an ends to a means. You know, I'll make enough money and try to put enough money away that now I can go do this and I can continue this when, like, your grandpa died. So um that's kind of some of the things, and our place is too small to have us all on that, or I would have probably done that and maybe not even gone to college.
Mm,
That's okay.
yeah.
You know, I learned some things in college. I learned a lot of stuff that doesn't apply to anything. But if you learn how to critically think, then you can do some of the things that you should. I think as far as a degree, if this is what you want to do, I think your brother did the right thing. You know, it's down to what is what is management 101. It's looking at your ground and your grasses. Can I
Mhm.
sustain this? And he is geeky about his grasses. You know, I
It's
mean,
annoying.
well, it's valuable, and I'll
It
ask him.
is. Yeah.
You know, I rely on him. I said, this is awesome. So in that case, you have to start with that foundation. What is this? What do you have? What can you utilize? What do you have that you don't need or you don't want, or it's competing? He has got that, you know, and it's funny because he's what, 2 years out of since he's graduated, or a year and a half.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I asked him, I said, hey, what about this guy? What is it? He goes, oh God, I don't remember. And I said, really? He goes, I can't believe I can't remember this, but I can figure it out, you know? So it's like, okay, he knows how to do what he needs to do to
Yeah.
get the answer. And somebody who's never done that, you know, isn't. We have some grasses there at the outlet of the spring. And I never said anything to you and him about it because it just, you know, some years are better than others. But this year there was a really particularly good growth. He goes, where did we get Timothy at that's growing there? And I said, it's not Timothy. He goes, how do you know? I said, well, take a look at it. I think it's Bermuda grass. And he goes, how do we get Bermuda grass here? I said, well, just figure it out if what it is. And he goes and he's looking at it and he goes, this is Bermuda grass. And I said, yeah, your grandmother bought some years ago from a guy in Georgia that guaranteed that this is going to grow everywhere and you won't be able to stop it and it'll be good forage. And, like, salesman will tell you anything that it grows great here where all this water is, of course, because it's Georgia. But she was
Yeah.
hell bent on
Yeah.
doing this, and I think your grandpa kind of, yeah, okay, yeah, we'll do this. And of course, you can't get enough water on it except for specific spots. And make some good forage right there. But it was kind of funny how that went. He looked at me, he goes, Bermuda grass. It is, but Bermuda grass, really?
That's
So,
fine.
but there's the difference where she was wanting to do something for an improvement, really good idea, but, you know, he sees the logistics of, you can't grow Bermuda grass like that here, not
Yeah.
in this spot, you know. So
Yeah.
that's kind of the difference there. That and at the time, again, no internet, you couldn't research this sort of stuff, and I don't think she just heard about this guy and was talking to him, and the rest is history. So everywhere else where it was dry, that Bermuda grass didn't do very well.
Yeah. Well, I think today's takeaway is you said do something you like and find like management of some sort, whether it's livestock, grass, something like that, ground management. And the big thing is if people are looking for a good quality school, do your research, find a quality school, and also know what your budget is and figure out if it's affordable for you. Or,
Yeah.
hey, I'll always throw this out there too. The Army, the Air Force, the Navy, if you're really willing to throw a couple of years out there and invest in yourself for 4, maybe 8 years or more, it's always a great opportunity to get ROTC scholarship. That's what I did. They paid the majority of my school, and I have uh, just over 2 years left, and I'm scot free, and it's provided me a lot of experience. It's helped me get the bank account on the right end of the spectrum because you get rid of the student loans and all that stuff, and then you can kind of start life fresh there. So
Yeah. No, and that's right. And that was a big help to you. I did it a little bit different. I did it as I could afford it. It took me 9 years to get through college because I was
right,
working full time and paying for it. But when I graduated, it was paid for.
right.
So just a different means, and use what is there uh, for your best fit on your lifestyle at that point. So yeah, nothing's free.
No,
I can't stress that enough. Nothing is free. You might be told it's going to be free. It ain't free.
right.
Work for it.
Yeah. I guess with that, I'll take it over and say thanks for listening. and we thank you until you're better paid.